All right, 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM listeners, you already know what time it is, and right here, right now, we got the ever so talented Prowess the Testament. How are you doing this evening?
Yes, I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much.
You are most certainly welcome. I gotta ask you, what's going on out in Washington right now? Because I just realized,
Well,
Biden's now in office, and also, how's the COVID situation out there?
yeah, so DC has had we've gone from being, I think, record-breaking numbers for the per capita. This is actually a pretty small city on population, but we've been pretty good right now. There's a lot of sanctions in place for stay-at-home orders, those kinds of things. There's not a lot of restaurants that have reopened, not a lot of public places. There's, mandated masks everywhere you go, outdoors and indoor. And so everywhere is still suffering, but I think we've at least got a controlled way of handling the number of cases from growing. And today, the energy today is just really, really beautiful, I think, in the city. As everyone is sort of, D.C. is a place that is extremely kind of progressive, and the city has always voted very Democrat. I think, in this election, 97% of the vote in D.C. went to Biden. So, of course, this was just, to see, and plus Kamala being a Howard University graduate, being from Washington, D.C., or being in Washington, D.C., that sort of iconic university here. This is really a glorious moment in D.C. Everyone's really happy and overjoyed, and just, a turnaround from, I think, a couple weeks ago with the storming of the Capitol and all the security breaches that were happening here. And many people that we all know, neighbors and friends and all kinds of stuff that were involved in that situation. So I think we're a little bit hopeful today.
Oh, most definitely. I've never seen, in my personal opinion, I'm in Canada, but we get a lot of the U.S. news because we're right close to the border here in Canada. And I've never in
Mm-hmm.
my entire life seen a president hated so much as Trump. So you know what? Get the go.
Exactly, especially in a city and being hated so much in the city that the base of the capital is in. So I think it's even harder because, he gets booed when the motorcade is traditionally a really good experience for Washingtonians, for D.C. residents, when the president's motorcade comes through. It's, a 20-minute sort of promenade down, major thoroughfares. So traffic stops, everything stops, and that happens, sometimes once a week. Depends on if you're in the heart of downtown. That might happen a couple times a week. And so, you see the president's helicopter fly by. You see a lot of that happen. It's a normal experience, and people are like booing and flipping the finger, and it's a whole different. Just the energy in the city was always kind of just somber whenever like that would happen. So people are just. There's farewell parties here. Online, virtually, to just be like, get out of here. We're done. Welcome democracy back to the world.
And I gotta ask you there, Prowess, like taking you back to the beginning of your career, like what actually inspired you to get into the music industry initially?
Oh, I come from a family of musicians. So I think seeing some music, it's an interesting thing because I feel like when you do come from a family of musicians, there's sort of a twofold thing that either happens. Sometimes it happens that you get inspired by music, being in your household, or it can be that I guess it can really leave a sour taste in your mouth. My uncle played was a lead guitarist for the Temptations, and wrote, was a songwriter for Burt Bacharach and Aretha Franklin, and he had this, really famous platinum, I guess you call it, a platinum hit single in the 80s called "Don't Stop the Music" that was popularized by this group called Yarborough and People, who was the number one song in like 81. So prior to me even being born, there was this sort of thing in the air about like my Uncle Jonah being this really great musician, and he wrote for the Gap band, and just really did these outstanding things, right? So it made it really, I guess, exciting to be able to follow in his footsteps. And he's always been celebrated in the family. And so there were so many people that kind of followed in his footsteps. There's a lot of people that play guitars, a lot of people that play bass guitar. And so I think that initially was very inspiring for me. As far as the rap side, so I've always kind of dabbled in instrumentation. And when I was in about first grade, De La Soul and Sonic came to my elementary school. And this was at the height of De La Soul is Dead. And that, I think, it just was a major deal for me. I think they were already, I was probably, like I said, in about first grade, or I may have even been in kindergarten. I was super young. But I remember the impact of that, right? Like Prince Paul to this day is my favorite producer, because that was my first time ever seeing a producer on stage, ever seeing someone actually use vinyl on stage, ever seeing, what it looked like. I'd seen rappers on TV, but I'd never seen someone actually manipulate, perform in a real life setting in that way. So I think that was honestly when I got the bug, like 92, to kind of, just be piqued. My interest was piqued as like, I want to do that. Like, I could be like De La Soul. I need the rest of the members, but I want to be like Prince Paul. That was the first time that I've ever really had the bug, I guess.
And also, as well, when me and my team were doing the research for this interview, the one thing that really, really caught our eye was that you actually received your name from the legendary KRS-ONE. I have to ask you, what's the story behind that? Because I was so intrigued when I saw that, because, KRS-ONE is a legendary individual within hip-hop. So if he's giving you a name,
yeah.
that's huge.
It is. That was sort of, KRS-ONE has, sort of, it's not a physical space, but the Temple of Hip Hop, if people don't know, was sort of it was a practice around sort of the teachings and the knowledge of hip hop beyond the entertainment piece. It was the space of international hip hop preservation, sort of a ministry. And there was a tour that was a hip hop appreciation week. So every year or every other year, KRS-ONE would do this tour, global tour for hip hop appreciation week, which was always in May. And he came to DC and was looking for openers for that tour. And I was one of the many people that auditioned to open for this tour. So a lot of my friends were there. We all auditioned. At the time that I auditioned, my shoe came off during my performance. So, I get up on stage, and it's already a really daunting crowd, because you're like, they don't really want to see these these kids. They want to see KRS-ONE. They're looking at us like, who are these people? Like, get them off stage. And my shoe came off. And at that moment, your face was like one or two decisions. You're going to run off stage, or you're going to, like, use that. And, like, I did what everybody else, I feel like every MC does. I improvised. And I, rapped about losing my shoe and my shoe coming off, and made jokes, and people were laughing. And by the time that, like, those faces that were, like, sour, like, in the B-boy fans, like, get this chick off here, they became people who were, like, cheering for me and, like, didn't want me to leave the stage. And when I left off the stage to, sort of the next act to come on, KRS-ONE was standing there. Speech from Arrested Development was at that show, and Big Daddy Kane was at that show with this tour. And he said to me in front of all of them, that is Prowess. That's called Prowess. And so for me, it wasn't like he's officially, right, like, knighted me with this name. But I went by a different name at that time, and I was like, he's just basically told me that I've embodied prowess, like the idea of being able to flip in that moment. I could have failed, I could have floundered, I could have left on stage crying, but I was able to make fans in that space and, like, have people cheer for me. And I think that was something that I stuck with. The testament actually came from, I used to get called, like, preach, and I came from a church background, stuff like that, in school. So people would always call me, like, biblical names. So I kind of wanted to incorporate that into my name. So I always liked the word tabernacle, but it didn't work, right? It was when I was tabernacle, this didn't work. But the testament, I felt like was a synonym of that. So that's how I became proud of the testament.
And when you said tabernacle and whatnot, down here in Canada, a lot of people would hear that and be like, oh, she has the French version of the F word in her name type thing, right? Because down here in Canada, I think that's what tabernacle means in, like, French or something like that. I could be wrong.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, people think, I mean, right, if you look at different things, for me, it's French profanity, but only in Quebec, I believe. Only in Quebec. I'm not sure if it's in French, if it's in like Parisian French or if it's in France, but I know that word is definitely a profane word in Quebec. So it all depends. I think it's funny how like a euphemism can go from being like a really sacred word, and in other cases it's a really offensive, sort of foul word.
And normally the reason why I mentioned that and asked you is this because the fact is like down here in Canada, Quebec wants to be kind of like their own country. So it's one of those things that everything Quebec does, the rest of Canada kind of like takes it with a grain of salt and goes, yeah, whatever.
That is, yes, I laugh at that because that's kind of DC. We're sister cities then, because that's kind of how DC works. It's like, it's kind of got its own thing. It's not really a state, it's still a city, so the taxation without representation, it's all these little weird nuances about it. They got their own little way. So it's very similar.
And also, as well, in 2016, you actually released the album Right Where I Left It. I was wondering, what's the story behind that phenomenal record? And of course, where can our listeners buy themselves some copies today?
Yes, so if you, right where I left it, I actually just put that on Spotify, so it is on streaming sites now. It is on all streaming platforms. But that album came about because I had went on was an artist for a while. I went on a 7-year hiatus after sort of being, starting my hip-hop career, so to speak, so being an MC, writing and recording. I took 7 years off to travel. I went to Africa for a while. I, just kind of went away from music. And during that time, coming back after a 7-year hiatus, I noticed that all the spots, and they have been, every city changes drastically. And I always feel 7 years, that milestone of things can be drastically different when you return. And they were drastically different, but everything was sort of right where I left it. If I put my mic down 7 years ago and walked into, the light, I come back out of that, sort of nebulous space, and I come back and it's all the people, the same people in the scene, there's the same open mic spots, they just change location, but it's the same, same 15, 20 bars and restaurants that are doing it. It's the same radio station. I have different people there, but it's the same, so that was kind of the premise of right where I left it. And it was really about sort of my journey from the hiatus to the return, and it's really sort of delving into the songs that were sort of the things that I went through during that time.
And I gotta say as well, I actually had the opportunity to check out that phenomenal record, and I have to say the song The Prestige is actually my favorite track on that record.
Yes, that song is very near and dear to me and features the two artists on there, Artemis and Matter of Fact, are childhood collaborators that I had, so people that I grew up with in open mics, and that I started, recording music with early in, my 16, 17, in high school. And so them being on the song, the whole idea around, it was two really humble guys that really never take the time to brag, right? So I wanted to really use this as an opportunity to be if I could think of, two people who are just not the, braggadocio type, and I want to do, a braggadocio album, I'm going to get these two guys, these really humble guys that have done so much and have so much history, let me get them. And so that was kind of how that happened. And my friend Ruffian Kick out of Appleton, I'm sorry, not of Appleton, out of Apple Valley, California, he produced that album or that song and a couple of other songs in the album, and he was 21 at the time. We met each other on SoundCloud, so it was just anything is possible. But he reminded me so much of myself starting out in my career, where he was just a student of the game, and I love that.
And that honestly sounds phenomenal as well. You guys got to actually learn together. You know what I mean? And at the same time, you got to show him some new tricks within the music industry as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And at that time, I think he was probably using SP404, 303 to produce, and just getting started, kind of learning how to sidechain a little bit, and like now he's like, I mean, for instance, we got songs with DiBiase and just really doing great things. For people that don't know, DiBiase is a producer who has definitely been signed to Fat Beats and like a bunch of different stuff. He's from LA, but yeah, just he's really grown as an artist, and to see him, he also primarily uses 303 and 404 as well. So that lo-fi kind of hip-hop thing, a ruffian kick is doing, and just seeing him grow through a space, it like reminded me, like I said, when I was like 19, and with all my friends, he's such a student of production. So he knew every single producer, like in the city of D.C. when he lives in like, the Valley of California. He's like, yeah, Kev Brown, I'm a huge fan. Kev Brown's a D.C.-based producer. Like, how do you even know him? Damu the Fudge Monk, another great producer. They're global names, but he was such a fan of some of their stuff that isn't even released. Just a rare 12-inch in a store he found or something. So I love that kind of mindset.
And also as well, going aside from your music standpoint of things there for a few moments, I also noticed as well that you actually worked as a sub on a research grant actually out in Africa. I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more about that, and of course, what was it like going from America all the way to Africa?
Yes, so that was all during sort of my hiatus. I went to go work we got a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation to go work on sort of storytelling, what was going on at that time in sub-Saharan Africa. There was a lot of, most people know there's a lot of diseases, but specifically HIV, transmission of HIV was really high in that time frame. And so there was a lot of programs out there to reduce transmission of HIV, specifically from like maternal, from mothers to infants. And so that grant was around helping to develop storytelling programs for teaching patients sort of how to empower themselves to be able to tell their stories about their pain. Because oftentimes pain is a taboo. People don't want to talk about it in different cultures, especially. And in Swahili, there's not a lot of words that actually represent the same words that most other languages have for different elements of pain. And scales of pain and explaining, what you're feeling. And there was a lot of sort of old sort of medicine tactics and stuff that were used. So, for instance, there was a kid, had a gash in his face, and they were using like maggots in the face to, take that. It was just disturbing sometimes, but you get an opportunity to see I was working in Eldoret, Kenya, which is a really rural part of Kenya, in the mountains of Kenya. And then I also got to be in the big city of Nairobi, and I got a chance to go whitewater rafting on the Nile, and do these really incredible things, and be a part of the space there and learn Swahili. And it was one of the most magnificent things I've experienced in my life. Just I felt so at home there. The people were astounding, and this was right around the time that Obama was getting elected. So it was like 2007, 2008, and so Kenyans were so proud of Obama with his Kenyan heritage. It was such a good time to be in Eldoret. And some of his family lived in Eldoret, which is this, like I said, sort of Rift Valley region of Kenya. And so it was just really awesome to see that. And it was one of the best experiences, like I said, of my life. I just really enjoyed being in that space. And I like I jokingly said, I tried to sort of leave music and leave rap specifically behind. And one of the most memorable experiences was like being in the compound. I was on like a college campus called Moore University. I'm in a dorm or whatever. I'm waking up, and there's someone playing J. Rule's One Day. And it was just like, I'm all the way in Kenya. I don't know how, I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm really into hip-hop right now. I'm like, of all the songs, right, there's like One Day is like blasting, and, you listen to the beginning of that, it's like one day about 6 o'clock, I woke up by the sound of a buzzer. It's like this whole entire story. And I felt like I was living that. It was like 6 a.m., and I'm waking up by the sound of J. Rue the Damage telling the story. So for me, that was like, it told me also, like, you can't run from your destiny sometimes. It will follow you.
And I have to ask you as well, pertaining to that experience, like, what was the lifestyle and culture like versus America? Because I know a lot of people say there's poverty out in Africa, and then some people say there isn't. You know, and the reason why I'm asking is for the listeners that never had the opportunity to really visit Africa. Like, what is it like? Is it exactly like how people portray it, or like is there some like flaws with what those commercials on TV show?
No, so yes, that's such a good question because Africa, it's just like anywhere else, right? There's poverty and there's also significant wealth. And Africa has something called sort of Big Five wealth markets, and those are the places that have the richest people and the most assets on the continent. And those are like markets like South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Morocco, and Kenya. So being in Kenya and being in that space, like I said, where there is amazing wealth and sort of coming together to see, there's a lot of real estate, there's a lot of commercial interest in those particular countries. There's a lot more sort of employment and outlook of high net worth individuals who are in those countries. So it's not unlikely to see someone like in a very rich compound, like I said, in Africa. But wealth is misdistributed, just like it is, I feel like, in everywhere else, especially in America, where there's communities that don't ever see the wealth that's held on, sort of in America. And very similarly there, right? So it's sort of like there's a lot of difficulties in sort of the wealth trickling around everything. There's where those in Nigeria, there's a lot of wealth. You go to a country like Ethiopia, it's not the same. Or go to Zambia, there's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of tourism. There's a lot of 5-star hotels, that kind of stuff. And so it is varying. But I feel like one of the things I always tell people is like it's just like sort of anywhere else where wealth doesn't always get distributed properly. The wealthiest of individuals are not really sharing that. There's people who are riding around, some of the like sheikhs over in, Abu Dhabi or something. Like they're not sharing it with like some of the shepherds that are, nomadic peoples that are in those areas as well. And that's very similar to that experience.
And also as well, going back to your music side of things, I also noticed as well that you have actually done some phenomenal work with the individual by the name of Nathaniel Starr. I was wondering, how did yourself and Starr actually get connected? And of course, what was it like working with him?
Yeah, so I met Nathaniel Starr actually so he had been performing in the area, in the region for a while, working really alongside a lot of people in the industry that I respect, and had done a lot of work with sort of low budget, just a crew here in D.C., or that was formulated here in D.C., Kev Brown, people like that, and Camber. And so I had seen some of the work that he had done, and then he reached out to me for a verse for an album that he was working on. And at the time, I had a hook laid for the song Heaven that I had, and I really kept saying I really would like to get another voice for it, but I couldn't really brainstorm who I wanted. And after I had heard more of the work that he had put out and just some of the great stuff that he was doing, I really enjoyed working with him because he was so professional. And the experience of like me sending him a verse is just, he had everything I needed done. He had it done. He had the beat to me in moments. It's like from the time he called me immediately when I got the beat to explain to me the concept, to let me hear what he was, his laid down of his verse, and sent me the lyrics. So it's just so organized, and I don't always get that. And I feel like a lot of MCs get a bad name because we're not always organized in that way. So I love the fact that he has like this whole cadre of talent from like live music, and he can play instruments, and he can sing, and he can rap. He can really do. He's a Renaissance man. And so I laid the hook, and then we hit him up, and he was like, send it to me, let me hear what it sounds like. And he's like, can I play with it a little bit? And I'm like, you're free license. I mean, within a day, or probably later that night, I had the verse in my my inbox like a snippet of what he had done, a rough pass, and it was like, here's a couple of rough passes actually. Let me know what you like, and then I'll double this. I'll mix it. I'll mark it where I need it to, where I'm coming in, and I'll send it back to you. And my engineer was like, who is this person? He's so organized. Like, he's marked where his verse goes. He's already put his effects on it. So he didn't leave it for me to do, and be able to say. He knew what his sound was. He owned his sound. He, had the different pieces that he wanted, his harmonies, all of that kind of stuff highlighted the way he wanted it highlighted. And so I love that. So Nathaniel Starr is like, I love people that really take charge in that way, because I'm not always the most organized. And I feel like, as an MC, there's so many times I work with the collaborator, and they're like, all right, send me the verse. I have no, deadline. I don't have a rough pass to know where I'm supposed to come in. You'll be like, so where do I come in? Because assumedly, you want me to do 16? You might want me to do 8. You might want me to do 12. It's like, just go for what you know. And then you want me to do 64 bars? Like, what does that look like? So I like that he was methodical about things, and just, he's got a good spirit that I just like being around. He's just, soulful and just, really principled, and I just, I love that comes through.
And I have to ask you, does yourself and Nathaniel, do you guys have any new projects currently in the works, or is that the only one so far?
So that is what I hope will be many to come. I've got a collaboration with him on his side that he'll be dropping a song that he did on his project. And he's got several projects dropping in 2021. So hopefully I'll make the cut on one of those projects. We've got like 6 or 7 projects in the works. And I definitely have plans for him of being on a couple of other of my joints that I'm dropping this year as well. So I'm putting the call out to Nathaniel Starr to be like, I definitely want the soulful kind of dripping with, this really infectious kind of a voice that leaves an imprint with you.
And I have to ask you as well, so I noticed that you actually dropped a brand new project on December 18th, so really not that long ago. You dropped A Tale of Two Masters. I was wondering, what's the inspiration behind that project? And of course, where can our listeners buy or stream themselves a copy right now?
Yeah, so A Tale for Two Masters right now is a Bandcamp exclusive on my Bandcamp, prowess.bandcamp.com. The story of that was sort of... There's a film that I really love called Crossroads, and it's sort of about the Ralph Macchio's in the film. He's a classical guitarist who was trying to find this lost recording from Robert Johnson, a blues guitarist, and he goes on a quest to sort of find himself and lose himself kind of in the process of trying to really go from being a classical guitarist at Juilliard to find that, being a blues man. It's not realizing, blues is not something you play. It is something you are. And in the beginning of the film, Ralph Macchio gets told by his professor, you cannot serve two masters. You can't be in the classical. You can't exist in blues at the same time. These are sort of different constructs. The one's a primitive construct, and the other one is, a learned concept that is celebrating all these different things. And so this was really set out a quest for me to really determine, is that true? You can't serve two masters. I found myself torn between a lot of different worlds all the time. I'm a mother. I was a full-time grad student trying to be a musician, an MC, and, a producer, and trying to, lead an organization. I was, a senior leader at an organization doing sales and the marketplace, and also trying to really find my voice a little bit of like, okay, now I've been doing this music for a long time, where do I stand? And so this is what this path was, really trying to find out, is that true? Can you serve two masters? And in the end, I kind of realized the masters are within you, and that you absolutely can serve as many masters as possible, but it sometimes does mean that you might have to forsake one to have the other. So you really have to be prepared it's not easy to juggle 100% of the time. At some point, there is always going to be a ball in your hand and a ball in the air. So you got to figure out, how to multitask.
And I have to ask you, on Bandcamp, can individuals actually buy themselves some hard copies today? Because I do know some of our listeners really do still love that compact disc format.
Yeah, so they will be able to buy hard copies very soon, like within days. I've got a deluxe version of that album coming out that is going to be a film, a companionship, or so sort of like a score to what I would consider to be the film that I just mentioned called Crossroads. Sort of if there was a modern iteration of it, my collaborator, The Unknown, who's a wonderful producer, who is a part of Odyssey's band, who plays NPC in Odyssey's band. And for those of you who know how great of a producer Odyssey is, imagine the person that plays NPC in Odyssey's band must be an incredible producer, right? So Unknown is sort of has scored A Tale of Two Masters and made it into a really cohesive kind of film narrative now when you listen to it. And it's up there to me with like a Supreme Clientele after he's kind of put his touch on it. So that the hard copy of that deluxe project will be available very soon.
And I have to ask you, so this is the time in the interview that I give a chance for the individual that comes on, just a chance to like talk about or promote any projects that I happen to miss. Like, is there anything else you want to promote when we have you here live on the airwaves?
Yes, so I've got, please definitely stay tuned. For those people that don't know, I also have a alter ego that goes by Sky God, which is sort of this aviation-inspired aesthetic that really sort of talks about, the very kind of 70s blaxploitation kind of a moniker. But Sky God sort of represents, I feel like, that inner rebel inside of all of us. It's very aerobatic storytelling. It's, really is about sort of sexual identity, and but it's all like this really boom bap, jazzy underscore production. And so Sky God Part 1 is available on streaming outlets and is available on my website, but Sky God Part 2 is going to be coming out in April. And so that's going to be a really interesting project with something really different and nuanced than what you've heard from me in the past. And then I've also got Unknown and I are working on this concept project, mythology-inspired project. So about all those weird creatures that go bump in the night, the things that go bump in the night, and like a kraken and poltergeist and all these different things that are going to be featured on that album. That's going to be dropping this summer. So yeah, just definitely stay tuned. And I've done like a host of. I realized after I counted it up, I've done like 50 guest verses on different people's albums. So or close to that. So you definitely, I've got a song out there about Streets of Rage 2, a song out there about Splatterhouse 2 for video game fanatics, a Metal Gear Solid song. Like I've got a Castlevania song coming soon. So if you are a video game head, like I've got that loaded up in the deck too. And yeah, just definitely more like stuff that I'm going to be bringing. I might even do a surprise instrumental album of like all the beats I've done this year for 2020 and 2021. So I'm hoping to maybe get that out this year for 2021. So it'll turn the other, I guess, screw and let people see the other side of me behind the boards.
And so this is the time in the interview that I give a chance for the individual that comes on the radio station, just a chance to give shout-outs to whomever they want to give shout-outs to, and of course your social media handles. That way our listeners can follow you and stay updated on everything Prowess, the Testament, if they're not already doing so.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first I have to give a shout to ADST Media, who set up this interview, which is the entertainment firm and sort of music consulting firm that I work with. They do everything from marketing and artist development. It's run by my good friend Dre, who's just, really passionate about music, especially the music that comes out of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and the artists that come from here. So shout out to him, and then all the artists that are affiliated with ADSC Media, from Princeton Nomad to Nonchalant to Tim Hicks and the Dirty Church to Kenilworth Katrina to Night Train 357 to Arnell's Vacation. The list goes on. There's so many of us that are on that team And then shout out to, like, we talked about earlier, Artemis, and matter of fact, they have been, definitely different sides. When you talk about Tale of Two Masters, like a Tale of Two Kings, they've just been inspired me in my music. And, I'm hoping to keep going. Shout out to Edward Aziz, who works on Music to Marvel, too, which is another project I'm affiliated with, that reimagines all the different characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I got a chance to play everything from Okoye and to Ironheart, Riri Williams, and now with Marvel and Disney being able to pilot. So, like, WandaVision, for instance, is like one of those shows that's going to be showcasing the different characters from MCU and these TV shows. So you might get something interesting. There might be another Music to Marvel 2 coming up. So shout out to Edward Aziz for pioneering that project, that I'm looking forward to having a new edition out. And you might get, me on a Black Widow verse this time, and maybe a Storm, a Royal Monroe song. So definitely, just all those folks have been really instrumental in my life. And I'm looking forward to 2021 being bigger, better, and more than it was in 2020. Like, in terms, just really growing as an artist.
And I gotta say, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy evening and coming on 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM. It was an absolute honor and most definitely a privilege to welcome you on our radio station airwaves.
Thank you so much for having me. And I didn't drop that you can find me at My Name is Prowess on all platforms. So my name is Prowess, Prowe, 2 S's. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed the interview. It was such a dope station. So, yeah, keep it pop alive. You gotta love it.
Hey, most definitely. Thank you so much for the positive feedback, and I can promise you this station is not going off the air. So I hope to have you back on sometime soon. Thank you so much, Prowess.
Thank you, and shout out to Canada and my producer, who I would be remiss if I did not say. Shout out to The Solution in Ottawa, who has powered so much of my album. So I love you, Canada. I love you, The Solution.
Most definitely. Thank you so much again, Prowess. Have yourself a wonderful night.
You too.